Hello, and welcome to the Complete Podcast Network. I'm Anthony Wilson, recording from Los Angeles, California. On today's show, Arch Manning struggles against Ohio State, Kalen DeBoer still looks in over his head at Alabama, and Hassan Longstreet teases his potential for USC. Let's get to it. So, the biggest game of the first uh, full weekend of college football, of course, was Texas at Ohio State. Texas came in the number one ranked team in the country to begin the season. Ohio State ranked number three, but Ohio State was a 1.5 point favorite at home um, at the Horseshoe. And in a defensive slugfest, they won it 14-7. Even bigger or more noteworthy than the result was of course, most of the attention was paid to Arch Manning, who did not play well. He went 17 of 30 for 170 yards, one touchdown and one interception. The touchdown came on the second and final drive for Texas. Before that, also Texas was getting shut out. And then Texas got the ball back with a chance to possibly tie the game on their final drive. There was a third down play where the receiver for Texas, uh, he had some space in front of him, but Manning put the ball a little bit behind him, and he wasn't able to haul it in. And Texas ended up turning it over on downs, and Ohio State was able to get out of there with the victory. Um, I spoke about this earlier this week about Arch Manning and how he was being set up to fail. He reached a real fever pitch during the game as he was really struggling. As I said, the late touchdown it didn't salvage it. It made it a little bit better, but then, like I said, he missed the receiver that on that third down play there, and it just sort of I don't know. It played out exactly as I sort of predicted. It really doesn't mean that much, right? Because it is what it is. I mean, they played a really tough road game. Neither team played well on offense, and I don't really know what anybody really expected Arch Manning to do. I said earlier this week, as I said that if he plays poorly, then everybody's going to look at that and go, well, what was with all the hype? And that's what pretty much what people are doing. And I said, well, no, if he plays well, if he throws for 350 yards and four touchdowns, and it'll just take the hype to a whole new level. But of course, he was never going to throw for 350 yards and four touchdowns on the road against Ohio State in the first game of the season. I mean, that would have just been insane, right? As it turns out, he didn't even get halfway to 350 yards. But as I said, bro, there was no reason to begin with for anybody to think that. The hype was based on what exactly? The hype was pretty much, like I said, if his name was Arch Myers instead of Arch Manning, then it wouldn't have been this type of hype to begin with, right? And if you look at it, so his counterpart today, Julian Sand went 13 for 20 for 126 yards and a touchdown. Right, so he didn't play well either in his first game as a starter for Ohio State. But that wasn't the story because if his name was Julian Manning, and he was one of the third generation Manning like Arch, he'll be like, well, what the hell? That wasn't that impressive when he won, because it's different when you win, though. Like even if if Texas had found a way to pull out the game, and Arch had the same performance, it just would be a different tune than it is with them losing. Uh, and so, the thing about it is just watching him. Yeah, like he can run better than his uncles could, but I don't see what it is about him that ever made anybody other than his last name, and there's really nothing that I see that makes him special, right? He's just another kid. He was a five-star recruit, but I don't see anything about him that makes him any more special than any other five-star kid who's getting his chance now to start at the college level. I don't see it. You know, so uh, I don't really know. The funniest thing I saw though was a tweet from this guy who said he said Matt Patricia uh, he said Matt Patricia said, man, I coached against the real Mannings. This is easy. you know. So Matt Patricia, shout out to him. He did a great job out there. His first game as Ohio State's new defensive coordinator. And he's somebody who's taken a lot of flack over the years, but you know, I think at the end of the day, he's come from the NFL and now he's coaching in college, so it should be easier for him, you know. But Arch Manning will have better days. I was listening to Spencer Hall on Bomani Jones's podcast, and he was talking about the next few games for Texas after this one, and how that'll give Arch Manning to put some numbers up and feel better about himself. So it's not really that those three games also aren't going to tell you much about him, as Spencer Hall was saying. It'll be later on in the season before we can get a better assessment of old Arch. But obviously, I mean, not a great start, but he'll have better days, for sure. But I just like I said, I saw it coming. I don't know who couldn't see it coming. You know, If isn't an Andrew Luck situation where the hype built to a point, and then finally that last year that Andrew Luck had in college, he had done enough to deserve the hype. Andrew Luck is still, uh, he remains the most. Cam Newton is if I had to start a college football team with the goal, of course, of winning a national championship, and I can only pick one player from the history of college football, it would be Cam Newton. So in that sense, he's the best college quarterback that I've ever seen. But as far as college quarterbacks being NFL prospects and NFL ready, then that would have to be Andrew Luck. And of course, I mean Andrew Luck in college, he was the most hyped quarterback prospect since John Elway. More hyped even than Trevor Lawrence was, right? And Arch Manning, like I said, that's the type of hype that he was getting, but he hadn't done anything. He played a little bit. He had a few starts last year for Texas, but it wasn't nearly enough for this type of attention and this type of anticipation for his junior year. Except as I said, as everybody knows, I mean that's the main selling point for Arch Manning is that he's a Manning. So yeah, it just it is what it is. But like I said, his actual performance itself, the fact that he didn't play well, it really didn't say much because not a lot of players would have played well in that. It had to be like somebody like a Cam Newton to go into Ohio State and actually play well, or Vince Young, somebody like that to pull that off. So, but it just slowly grow. Everybody just needs to. I think it needs to happen, so everybody can just like snap themselves back to reality and get a grip. Um, all right, so elsewhere, you had Alabama, uh, ranked number 8 to start the season, losing 31-17 at Florida State. It's Bama's first season opening loss since 2001. And, my main takeaways uh, watching the game are number one, I kind of already had this. I was planning and preparing to say this before the game even happened, and then the game happened, and what I wanted to say it still holds up, and that's that. Number one, Alabama, the aura is gone post Nick Saban. It's just not even the same feeling, and I think that's to be expected. Anytime you have a coach like that who obviously won 6 national championships during his tenure, which is absolutely bananas to win 6 national championships from. I think his first year there was what 2007 was it? What year was it? Was it 2007? Something like that was the first year. I think it was 2007. And then from 2007 to 2023, that's 17 years. They won 6 national championships. And so, of course, you expect that, when that, somebody like that steps down and you have to get a new coach, that it's not going to be the same, and it hasn't been the same. But Kalen DeBoer, he that's my second. I was trying to figure out what's the problem, because it's the same DeBoer who just 2 years ago he took Washington with not nearly the resources or talent of Alabama. He took them to the national championship game and had a runner-up for the Heisman in Michael Penix. So it's like, how do you come to Alabama, where Spencer Hall said this is still one of the top 5 rosters in college football, just in terms of pure talent. So they lost, they lost 4 games last year, and they lost. They started 0-1 this year, and it's kind of like what's the problem? And I think what the problem is that Kalen DeBoer does not know how to drive a Lamborghini, right? Kalen DeBoer is or he doesn't know how to drive a sports car or a superstar. He doesn't know how to drive a car. And I'm not a car guy. But he doesn't know how to drive a car that can go, and I don't know how fast cars go. I mean, he doesn't know how to drive a car. I'll just say he doesn't know how to drive a car that goes 150 miles per hour, right? He knows how to go 70 miles per hour, but he doesn't know how to be the guy who's going to get on the freeway, like I think Myles Garrett and, guys like that who'll get these cars and get on the freeway and do all this speeding and stuff like that. They want to say, well, let me see how fast this car can actually go, right? And I think that, because he comes from he never had this type of situation with this type of talent, and he kind of doesn't. He's still using his method that he used to get to this point, and what he did at Washington. And you have to realize that the more talent you have, the more you have to let it free, right? And I think the analogy I came up with was, I remember there was this video where, it's a cross-sport analogy, but I hope it makes sense to you, where you had it was the Gil's Arena guys, Gilbert and Swaggy P, Kenyon and those guys, and they were in I think they had like a live show, and Baron Davis was there. They were backstage, And they were talking about, Barron went to UCLA, obviously. Nick went to USC, and Gilbert's son Elijah before his injury, unfortunately. He's set to play for USC this upcoming season, and so they were talking about like why do these, because these days the big 5-star recruits and 4-star recruits, the big time recruits out of LA, they'll go to, or California, they'll go to USC before they go to UCLA, right? USC these days, they're the ones getting the big time recruits. USC is, and so when historically, USC was a football school, and UCLA was, the basketball school. But now USC is getting the more high value prize recruits, and they were saying, I forget which guy was, I think it might have been Arenas, was saying that, like, Mick Cronin, he was at Cincinnati before he got to UCLA, and so at Cincinnati, the way they need you to, and of course Kenyon Martin went to Cincinnati also, but the way the kids need to be coached at Cincinnati is different than some kid who's a 5-star recruit and he's only going to be in college for 1 year before he goes to the NBA. They don't want to, Mick Cronin is one of those old school, in your face, demanding, intense, taskmaster, micromanaging type of coaches. And these kids, they don't want that, and they don't need that. They need somebody who's going to let them be free, and I think that that Kalen DeBoer doesn't realize that, okay, Kalen, you don't have the same regular, like, like a car that's just going to get you to and from, and you try to make the most out of it. You have a supercar now, and so you have to let those guys just, that's what Pete Carroll did. Pete Carroll's like, we're going to recruit the best roster, and at that time, USC, Florida, LSU, those were teams that they were putting together teams and rosters that were as good or better than any in the history of college football, right? And so when you have people just like, yeah, of course, he coached them up, but the actual system, whether of course USC ran a pro-style offense back then, and the defense, I don't remember what, I think it was like it was a 3-4, I don't remember. But the point is that it didn't matter. The most important thing was you had these kids, the best players, the best collection of players you could possibly have put together at that time. You coached them up, you coached them up like crazy, and then you let them go out there and perform, And I think that's the mentality that you have to have. If you go back and you look at like Saban at Alabama, it's like, think about how many offensive coordinators he had, because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as you're coaching those kids up. It doesn't really matter who the offensive coordinator is or what the system is. When you got Tua and you got Bryce Young, and you have all those receivers that they had, and the running backs, Josh Jacobs, and all these different guys. It doesn't really matter what the system is. You coach the guys up, and then you put them out there, and you just let them loose, basically, on opponents that don't have nearly as much talent, nearly as many athletes. And I think that's what Kalen DeBoer has to do. Now, Ty Simpson, who made his debut as a starting quarterback for Alabama, he was okay. He was 23 or 43, 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Jeremy Bernard was their leading receiver. He had 8 catches for 146 yards. The running game, Kevin Riley, 5 carries for 31 yards. Richard Young, 9 carries for 26 yards. There was no Jam Miller. And then Justin Hayes, he transferred to Michigan, and he had 159 yards rushing tonight for them. So, I played a full season with Alabama on last year's college football game, and I won the Heisman with Justice Hayes. I'm sorry, with Justice Hayes. So he's definitely a missing a piece for them. Like I said, he had 159 yards tonight for Michigan. He could turn them back around. Very talented player. So, and I like Ty Simpson and what he brings. Once again, it just goes back to Arch Manning. What's the difference between Ty Simpson, Arch Manning, same thing, like I said, Julian Sand. It's pretty much the same thing, you know. He's a good quarterback. Sure, he's going to end up, doing well there. But, uh, you know, it is what it is. And Florida State, as I said, it's not the way. Yeah, Florida State, they came in uh, unranked. Uh, they have this kid Tommy Castellanos. He was 9 for 14, 152 yards. And he had 16 carries for 78 yards. All four of their touchdowns for Florida State, they came on the ground. So I can see why they would. The Alabama fans would be upset losing to this Florida State team. But Mike Norvell is a prideful man. He's a good football coach. He's going to coach his guys up, and so. It actually is. I didn't realize Castellanos was that limited. Like it's kind of like okay, we're gonna put this guy out here, and that's a college quarterbacky line, right? But so it actually is pretty bad for Alabama, and as Bomani Jones says, if you lose 3 games a year at Alabama, it's not gonna be long before you're looking for a job, another job, and they lost 4 games last year. Now they're 0-1. Game that they should have won, and they were expected to win. And Kalen DeBoer, buddy, that seat is already getting hot. Now on the late night tip, nobody else probably cares about this with me, but USC they beat Missouri State 73-13. Again, another game that the result doesn't mean anything. It's just a couple of good games for USC to start the season, and just to get a couple wins under your belt and get on the right track before the real games start. So, you start 1-0. Next week it's Georgia Southern, coached by former the head coach that Lincoln Riley replaced, Clay Helton, who I once took a picture with famously outside of at USC, outside of the Trader Joe's they have there. But that'd be good to see Clay. And it's good that Clay, even though he got fired, it's good that he has maintained a good enough relationship with USC that they could, he come back and schedule this game. It's nothing personal; it just didn't work out. And Clay Helton's a good guy, So it'll be good to see him back. He put a lot of guys. Clay Helton. The thing about Clay Helton is what we call irony. Is that low key the guys that Clay Helton put some guys in the league that he recruited. Drake London and St. Brown and Tutuiopo, and there are others. Those are Clay Helton recruits, and those guys are studs in the league. So, he coached a lot of good players for USC, but just didn't get the results that he or the program wanted, the fan base, the alumni, the boosters, and he had to go. And Lincoln Riley hasn't been doing much better, but tonight they did what they were supposed to do. Jaden Mayala he was 15-18. He had 295 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. He only played the first half, and in the second half, Hassan Longstreet, the prized 5-star recruit, he was the number 4 quarterback in this most recent recruiting class. He was 9 for 9 for 74 yards and a touchdown. He also had 8 carries for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we can already see what the type of weapon that he's expected to be for USC going forward. 8 Trojans scored, and the junior college transfer Wayman Jordan, he really stood out to me. But other than Miami, it wasn't a big numbers game for anybody. Although pretty much anybody. I know Kyle Lemon, I think he had 7 catches for like 90 yards or something like that. But yeah, it's just a good start to the season, but it is concerning. I saw what Colin Cowherd was saying to Joel Klatt about he thinks that USC is actually more talented on defense this year. Of course, they have Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, 2 future NFL players at receiver. But as I said the last time I talked about USC, they lost several important pieces to the transfer portal. So not the type of depth offensively maybe that they could have had, but it's I can't say it's not, you can't say anything based on this one game. I would say more than anything I'm concerned about the lack of offensive depth outside of those 2 receivers that I mentioned. But like I said, the schedule is not that difficult. Collins said 8 wins. I said 8 wins. I want at least 8 games. This one, that's what I hope. I hope they can get 8 wins, and then that can just lead into next year when Longstreet presumably will be the starter, and you got the #1 recruiting class coming in, and maybe that's as we get into like more like the second half of the Lincoln Riley era, things can pick up and we can get back to what we expected after that that first year when he first was hired. And then last but not least, this game ended just right before I started recording. I waited for it to end before I started recording. But you had LSU beating Clemson 17-10. Number 9 LSU beating number 4 Clemson 17-10 at Clemson. Cade Klubnik, someone who comes in after a great year last year, projected to be one of the top quarterbacks off the board in the draft next year, but he was not that good. He was not that good tonight. He was 19 of 38, 230 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception against a resurgent LSU defense, the best LSU defense has looked in a while, especially considering the opponent. And Garrett Nussmeier was 28 of 38, 230 yards, and a touchdown. So, Brian Kelly, if they can have a good defense there, like the defense, like I said, they look good tonight. LSU, they could have a chance there, man. There's always talent there, and when they have their best teams under Nick Saban and the Mad Hatter, they had defense. They didn't need defense in 2019 under Eddie O, because that was one of the most spectacular offenses in the history of college football. But yeah, I know they're encouraged out there in Baton Rouge. All right, so before I get out of here, just a reminder to hit that subscribe button next to the Complete Podcast Network, and to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at TC Pod Network. You can also send feedback and mailbag questions to CompleteLakersPodcast@gmail.com. I am out.